Hi there again, everyone. This is Bob Martin with the Nautilus Dry Docks, and today I am going to be giving you an overview of this completed 1/12 scale British X-Craft RC submarine. This is a beautiful kit that was originally mastered by a gentleman by the name of Alan Poole out of the UK. This particular model came to me in a quasi-completed state, but unfortunately only half of it arrived in the box because UPS smashed the box, lost the rear end, and just decided to call that good enough. So I had to fabricate an entirely new stern section for this boat, get it all rigged up and ready to go. So let me show you how it works, and we'll drop it in the pool and we'll show you how it works on and under the water. All right, let's get things started with an overview of the hull and components. As you can see, let's start with the boat itself. It's a beautiful size, lots of presence on and under the water. It's got an actuating periscope here, or snorkel, sorry, that you can raise and lower, and it's held in place magnetically in the raised position. All the periscopes are fully removable, so you can transport it just a little bit more safely. It's got a scale flag in the back, a cloth flag in the back, beautiful brass propeller. Moving on to the actual drive portion of the boat. This is an older model D&E watertight cylinder, 3.5 inches in diameter. It's got a geared 3-to-1 output shaft for the main drive shaft there. I've got some magnetic couplers on the back for rudder and dive planes. It's got an automatic pitch controller in there as well. It's a gas-based ballast system, and it uses airbrush propellant to blow the ballast system and a servo inside to open and close the vent valve. Main power comes from this 12-volt, 5-amp-hour sealed lead-acid battery. And these are perfectly happy living in the wet, provided the electrical contacts are insulated from the water. And you can see I've got a waterproof connector that will connect to the other end of the watertight cylinder there. Control is achieved via this Futaba 4-channel Skyport radio operating on channel 70 on the 75 megahertz band, which is what you need. For those of you that are unaware, gigahertz frequencies do not penetrate water, so we need the old 75 megahertz system. So let me show you how I get the boat prepped for operation in the water, how the cylinder gets installed, and getting it ready for the pond. So the main hull is held down with a series of the 3 plated screws, and I've used these so that you can actually just use your fingers rather than needing to use a tool. There's 2 in the back here, and there's 1 in the front. When those are removed, it gives you access to the hull. Now, there's also a removable section back here, and that's held in place magnetically. And that gives you access to the linkages and drive shaft for installation of the cylinder. And the reason it was done this way was because, as you can see, there's a very short section that came with the boat as built for putting the watertight cylinder in place. I would have done things a little bit differently, but this is what I had to work with. Once the cylinder is in place, and it sits about here, of course, you can see that the cylinder would be behind that kind of rear face of the hull, making it very hard to access the linkages to get them all hooked up. So I made this section removable, and as I said, just clicks in place magnetically and is held in place there. These saddles come with arms that hold everything in place. And in 1 second, we'll show you how the rear connections are made up, and we'll drop the cylinder in. So if we take a look at the back here, you can see we've got a rudder linkage here with a magnetic connector, as well as in the back here connections inside there for the dive planes. This little hook I put I created just so that it'd be easier to grab the drive shaft and the internal control linkages. This just drops right in place, and there is a pin on the inside of the ballast tank right about here. Sorry, right about here, and that just slips on over top. But before we do that, we're going to hook the drive shaft and connect it to the dog bone in the back. And to do that, you just hook it with the hook here, line it up with the adapter, and that is pretty well it. Give the drive shaft a little spin to set the, there we go. Push that down. Drive shaft is in place. I'm going to hook the dive plane linkages, pull it up, and it'll click right in place. It just snapped right in there. And it's the same thing with the rudder. Just going to push that in place and it'll snap right together. So that's it. That's as easy as it is to make up the linkages in the boat. Now what we're going to do is set up all of our cables and everything so that they go in nicely. But before we do that, I'm just going to drop the battery in place. Now, of course, before you put the cylinder in, you're going to want to drop the battery in place. And as you can see, it's got a little cradle in the bottom, and it just sits in there nicely, the weight of it keeping it in place. So now we are going to drop our arms down. I've got some stainless steel bolts that just slip through there. I was originally going to, have them with nuts on the back, but this works perfectly well and is a lot easier than having to mess around with that kind of stuff. So we're just going to take our cables and wires and tuck them into these slots that I machined in those arms, and that keeps everything nice and tight and tidy inside the hull. That done, we can connect our battery together. And that's perfectly fine because I've got a remote on-off switch built into this unit, so no power is going to it yet until we activate the key fob on the remote control. Speaking of which, let's take a look at that. I'll turn on the radio, turn on the unit with the on button on the key fob. Check out our dive planes and our rudder. And then also let's check out our throttle. It's nice and smooth and quiet. I got a hunch this thing is going to be a streamer in the water, but we'll check and see once we get it in the pool. Wanted to note, I've also got a battery link unit in here that will monitor the voltage coming out of the battery, and if it gets depleted, it will activate the fail-safe system. And it's also a missing pulse detector as well, so if it comes out of radio range, it will blow ballast as well. So, with that being the case, let's get our top back on. Seat that down nicely. Screw down our connectors and it'll be good to go. So before we go into the water, we're going to need to fill up the reservoir with this Propel, and this comes from a company called Badger. Got an adapter that screws onto the top, and it allows you to put it on the top here and fill it up. So we want to make sure we check our ballast controls so that we can determine which way is the blow, and that's in this particular direction here. So we simply press down and hold, and that's filling up that copper pressure vessel with the liquid. And now I can actually hit my blow cycle until actual liquid comes out when it blows, which it just did. So we're all full up here now, and you can just give it one more little squirt to make sure that we've got as much as possible in. So we are ready to go. This is not stain, that's ice, by the way. It's just the air forming. Be very cautious when you do that. I typically recommend you use gloves. Let's get this thing in the water, shall we?